the drill, and we're still giving her full throttle. Today, I'll be analyzing Dai's perspective from a 6v6 between Boo Bombs and Kira team. I'm going to be concentrating a lot on items for this one, mainly how to avoid getting hit, as well as using your items effectively. Also, I won't get into detail here, but I'd suggest joining my Discord server before submitting your perspective if you wish to do so. The link to that is in the description. But without further ado, let's start giving her, bud. Just before getting started, if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your minds. Starting things off, we got Yoshi Valley. In general, I don't have many problems with how Dai played this race. He did get quote-unquote unlucky in a few item situations though, and that's exactly what I'm going to go over here. And as always, when I say you, I'm most likely referring to Dai. Okay, so it's pretty clear what the mistake here is. You threw your green forward to get another item, and you got redded for it. But how can we fix that and make sure that you don't do this again in the future? If we look back, you had no clear idea that you were safe to throw away your protection. On top of that, while it's nice to see that you care about coins, you definitely should not have gone for them here. If you didn't, you might have been able to establish more distance from the opponent behind you, and maybe you could have gotten rid of your green in exchange for another item in that scenario. However, I think in general, it's much better to be safe than sorry in this game, and this common misplay clearly supports that. Even in 66, it's really important to play passively when you need to hold down the spot you're in. I'm not saying this singular misplay ruined your race, of course, but what if this happened on a track like Wario Stadium and the other team broke into top 4 while your team had no way of catching up afterwards? At the end of the day, taking risks is not a bad thing, but it's important to be careful when you're in a tight spot. In this scenario, yeah, you had no reason to throw away your green. Now, this may seem pretty unfortunate, and you were partially right to assume you wouldn't get random green while in the back. But to be honest, this is a back green that a lot of top players could see coming even this far back. It's important to not get complacent in this game, and I think had you stayed outside of the tight line, at least on the straight, you would have been perfectly fine. Besides, you would barely lose any time for it because it's on a straight. This may not seem like much, but on top of being able to naturally avoid more items by taking wide approaches like this, not doing so led to you getting bombed at the beginning of lap 3. Taking a wide approach, especially on straightaways, is a very easy way to prevent the likelihood of you getting hit unexpectedly, and you don't lose much for doing so. Avoiding items is a critical part of this game, and getting into habits that limit the chances of you getting hit can really help you out in the long run. Okay, first and foremost, you did not do anything wrong here. You pulled triple greens, and your teammate was right next to you, and you couldn't do anything about that. It may seem unfortunate, but there is a solution to this. I think naturally spacing out from your teammates whenever you can is a great way to prevent unfortunate events like this from happening. This is mainly for when you're passing an item set in the pack, but getting into the habit of spacing in general can help you a ton. Boos can really screw things up in a race, and it can happen where your item gets stolen, your triple greens come out, and your teammates are too close to you, and you take them out. So yeah, I think spacing and giving yourself room if you can is a great way to prevent unfortunate events like this from happening. Not too much happened after this, just you finishing off the race naturally. If you can get into focusing on avoiding items, as I mentioned earlier, and spacing if you haven't already, as I wasn't actually talking about you here, you'll benefit from it a lot. Next up, we have Cloudtop Cruise. Dai has a few moments where he doesn't do anything too harmful at first, but comes back to bite him shortly after. In this race, I'll mainly go over item usage. Alright, Dai, this was very early in the race, so it's not all that bad to miss this double box. But I still think it's important to bring up why you would have been much better off taking a single for the sole purpose of getting a box. Not only were you in the pack, but you also didn't have a clear idea of where the people next to you were because you went around the balloon. When you're in the pack, I think a good rule of thumb to go by is to never resort to a double box unless you know you'll get it no matter what. Single boxes are far less appealing, and with more of them laid out, you are much better off nailing a single in the pack. Again, very early in the race, but still something to consider if you aren't already thinking like this. Where you used your shroom wasn't particularly bad if you only had a shroom or had an item that didn't mean much to you in your pocket. But you pulled a star in 6th, and that does not happen often. The star is one of the most broken items in the game, and it's a very uncommon item to pull where you did. For this reason, I think you should have held onto your shroom. You could have waited to use your star when you absolutely needed to, or you could wait it out until your team potentially pulls shock, as long as you don't get screwed over if your team doesn't pull shock. Getting your star stolen by a boo can be very devastating, which is why you should have held your shroom. And especially for where you were, a star is probably the best item you could have possibly pulled. So in summary, I think you should have held both your shroom and star until A, you absolutely had to use your star, or B, your team definitely won't pull shock. This also applies to predicting shock if you want to try that out. So those are a few options in that regard. Simply put, you had no reason to throw away your greens, especially here. But I'll give you some ideas on what you could have done if you wanted to get rid of your greens. You could have thrown one up just before landing from the cannon glider, and it would go lightning fast until it collides with a wall. This could have potentially taken out the KT member who wasn't in a boo, even with them being much farther ahead of you. If you had no intention on hitting them, you could have either thrown your greens off on the following straight, or better yet, off the track into the next set. With your teammates behind you, backspamming was not an option, so good job on realizing that. But in general, you had no way of hitting the guy in the boo, and your only chance at hitting the guy farther ahead was to do the fast green strat. Either way, you live and learn, and that's the best way to look at this. Lastly, we have Electrodrome, and I think Dai played this race really well and very patiently later on in the race. I don't have much to talk about regarding what he could have done better, so I'll mainly bring up what he did right in case he didn't realize how smart the plays were in the moment, and either way, it'll help you guys, the viewers. I have mixed feelings about this part of the race. I think it was really good that you stayed left, going back to what I said earlier about staying out of the tight lines on a straight. But in this situation, it might have been a bit better to be flashy and drive awkwardly. This could involve steering from left to right or even snaking. This would give your opponent a much harder time greeting you, as even though he missed, he was pretty close. This also could have allowed you to take the pink path, and maybe you could have beaten first by the glider section. That's just something to consider though. In general, I think you handled this situation decently. Alright, great job here. There's a lot of depth that goes into this play, rather than just punishing the guy in second for being too aggressive. You held onto your banana the whole time, which could have signaled to your opponent that they could be more aggressive. Whether it did or not, it was a great idea to hide your red in your pocket. Patience really is a virtue in this game, and you held onto your items for a long while. And also, just taking advantage of the opportunity to take the guy out. Great job on that. Not much else to say here, really. Patience really helped you out here, so keep that up in general. Now, this wasn't as big of a play as the red patience, but still a great one nonetheless. What I'm a big fan of here is that you didn't try to take the guy out right away. You approached them wide, likely out of where they would expect you to be when backing fire, and as soon as you were close enough to them, it was time to operate. I've seen it happen online so many times where people would just waste grease to try to take someone out without taking a calculated approach. While it's good to take advantage of opportunities, you need to be smart with them, which is what you did here. So once again, great job on being patient with your triple greens and waiting until there was next to no chance you would not hit your opponent. Maybe it would have been better to just run into the guy rather than using 2 of your greens to take him out. I'm not entirely sure, but either way, great job here, and it paved the way for you to win this race. I hope you got something out of this video. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. As for Dai, I hope this video helped you out. I talked a lot about avoiding items and approaching situations effectively, so try to work on that where you can, and keep on giving her with the patience and calculated plays. Those go a long way, so keep that up. I wish you the best of luck moving forward. But until next time, thank you so much for watching. Have yourselves a fantastic day, and keep on giving her, bud.